welcome back. We're here with Michael Pezzullo from West Hollywood, California. And Michael is you're by yourself right now. Yeah, single private practice owner in West Hollywood, working and specializing primarily with gay men. And I'm going to let you explain all of that, but in a vast scope of traumas, anxiety, stuff like that. So, Michael, tell us about your business.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to do this. I have a private practice here in West Hollywood. If you're not familiar with LA, it was historically like the LGBT gay neighborhood, kind of like the West Village in New York City, but obviously that's expanded and now it's diverse in a lot of pockets. But uh, you'll still see like a predominantly queer population here for sure. Um, I have a practice. I work by myself. I work a lot with gay men in particular, and then in that population, I do a lot of work around trauma, addiction, and then a lot of relationship stuff too, like building relationships, maintaining them, finding the right attachment, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So did you grow up in LA or were you somewhere not California?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in New York City in Hell's Kitchen, which is also like a queer LGBT neighborhood. What's funny is like when you grow up somewhere, it just seems so normal to you, but every time I meet someone and I tell them that, they're always taken aback. Literally yesterday, I met someone, and he was like, "Really?" Because people associate Hell's Kitchen with like nightlife, theater, more of like you go out to have fun.
My migrant, totally.
Right, not like you have raise kids and have a family sort of a place, um, which I can understand. But there definitely were obviously certainly like quite a lot of families there too. So I get that quite a lot. That like, oh, that's where you're from. That's so unusual. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what was it like growing up in LA? I mean, like we're kind of more in a small town, you know,
hmm
conservative, yeah, very conservative place. So it's for me like you're like gay men for or gay therapist for gay man for gay, oh my gosh,
That was
yes,
hard.
that was hard. Yeah. That whole concept, like I I just don't know that in our like town that would have been like, kind of very taboo. So like were you growing up, like was that a big influence as to why you wanted to push for that? Do you?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I think so I grew up in, like the most diverse area you could imagine. There was
Yeah.
in my mind, there wasn't like a predominant group. It was so culturally diverse, socioeconomically
That's cool.
diverse, LGBT diverse, like everything was there. So you never felt like oh, this person's better or this is the majority or anything like that. Um,
That's like the dream childhood right
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. I'm so grateful to be from there and to have had that experience. Truly, it was fantastic. Um, Often when you think of the typical LGBT or gay person, this is kind of a stereotype, but they grow up in a conservative area, like you're referencing, where they feel very marginalized and they internalize a lot of negativity. And then when they're an adult, they go someplace where that's accepting, which is obviously super healthy and good. But then there's that
Right.
journey that they have to go through. So I think mine was probably a little bit more atypical.
Yeah. Why is that the stereotype though? Like you just assume like, oh, did you have a rough childhood? I
hmm
like that's awful, but like why is that? Yeah, why is that the stereotype as opposed to like this kind of normal healthy childhood where
Yeah,
it's just all accepted?
I think, in terms of the LGBT queer movement, we have come a tremendous amount in such a short amount of time, like dramatically. If you look at, like I'm a millennial, and then Gen X, and then now Gen Z, the experience of LGBT youth is dramatically different. It's not like a subtle change. It is truly night and day. So I think that most people that are, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, certain ages, um, it kind of goes without saying that wherever they were raised, it probably wasn't the most LGBT accepting. Even if it was like okay, it wasn't affirmed, it wasn't celebrated. It's if that makes
Yeah.
sense. But now, I mean, I worked briefly with teenagers when I was doing my hours, and there's everyone's like exploring. No one wants to be boxed in. It's so accepting, so inclusive. So I think that generation, when they go to therapy, it's going to be a very different arc that we're seeing.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to become a therapist?
So I decided to be, so I guess I'll put it this way that I felt like I started to struggle with my mental health a lot as a young adult when I got to college, which is very typical, by the way. That's very common window of time.
It's a lot of change that happens kind of like
Yes.
very
Yes, it's that, and also a lot of organic disorders that people struggle with tend to kick online during that time anyway, between 16 and
like what
24.
do you mean?
Like like a depressive disorder, an anxiety disorder, bipolar, sometimes even more severe things like a schizophrenia or a psychosis. There's this window of
And say it.
time that and we don't exactly know why this is the case, where certain conditions manifest and just tend to show up, and it overlaps with when people are in college. So you see that quite a lot.
That
Yeah,
sucks.
I've heard that 20 year mark is like when you are officially in your kind of personality. Like that's when it like
It
comes
has to
out.
be something with like, don't they say like the brain isn't fully developed until like 25?
Yes,
It has to be that, like, right? Like that just makes sense. It would probably be like that part of your brain, that's the part that's like developing it, I guess.
yeah, we do have this sort of rough understanding that around 25 is when your brain is fully developed. I mean, it could be different from person to person, but
Oh yeah, right.
yeah, but there is a window of time where a lot of conditions just tend to manifest. It's it's almost like it's been simmering and now it appears, and I feel like that was the case for me. And the 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 journey of from I'm a person who's struggling with my mental health toward getting better is so convoluted. You don't know where to go, who to ask, who to talk to. Do I go to therapy? Do I take medication? Do I do this? It's just all over the place. And then also too, if you can't afford the resources, you don't have access to them. So that's
Yeah.
really what I started to stumble around with when I was younger. Um, and I had originally gone into a career in advertising and marketing right out of college, and I just found it, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. Like there was nothing wrong with it. And a lot of my friends really enjoyed it. It just wasn't speaking to me personally. And so I decided to go to grad school and pursue a different degree, and that's how I got on the journey to becoming a
I feel
therapist.
like a lot of people who are not psychology majors are interested in marketing for kind of the same reasons
Mm,
as people going into psychology.
Yeah, because
Don't you hear that a lot?
it like gives them a platform, maybe even to like research and figure out like what they're struggling with. There really isn't like a best way to, like, if you did not grow up with like any kind of therapy is beneficial and helpful in your life, or like just even knowing that that was an option or realizing that that was an option, like a realistic option, I don't know how you would start to realize like something is wrong, but I don't know how to go from there.
hmm
But I think you're right. I think it's in the conversation a lot more than it used to be. It
Oh, it
definitely
is.
wasn't
Like,
in the conversation when I was a kid.
yeah, you can find so like I mean, it's so nerdy, but it's not nerdy because it's TikTok, but like
Yeah.
there's so much on
Yeah.
there. There's so many people that are, even if they're just talking and like voicing that they're having these issues,
So
it's like,
helpful.
I am too.
My
Or
therapist on
whatever.
TikTok. Yeah.
I
There's
So
lots of
you
them.
started out in addiction counseling though, right?
yeah, well, so
Right.
so when you're in school, you get placed in these like kind of like lower fee counseling clinics in around town where people can go to get therapy. And I still refer to them sometimes too, because you can go get therapy for like $20-$30. Like it's
Was this, where are you at this point? Are you in California or are you still in New York?
I'm in LA. Yep, I'm in LA. So I started off there, which those places are kind of a more typical outpatient clinic of someone's depressed, someone's anxious. It's, that sort of a thing. And then when I got out of school, I started to work in more higher level of care. So this is where you're getting into like residential treatment, intensive outpatient, they call one of them partial hospitalization, which is kind of an antiquated term. It's
Oh
basically
wow.
just means it's 6 hours a day of treatment versus like 3 or 4. Um, so
Wow.
more structured environments. In LA, there are so many treatment facilities and rehabs. It is
Sure.
such a
That makes
saturated
sense.
market out here,
Yeah.
and it's a
Mhm.
destination and that sort of a thing. So anyway, so yeah, so I worked at a few different ones to see the different perspectives, like the really, really high end where you're working with the
A really
0.1%.
bougie one.
Yes,
Yeah.
extremely wealthy. And then I worked at like the government Medi-Cal funded. So I've seen the gamut of how it works out. Um, and I did that for a couple of years, and I was building my practice on the side while I was doing that, and then I was able to make the transition about 3.5 years ago.
What when you were in
It's a
these
lot of work.
were they treatment facilities for like substance abuse or like just any kind of addiction, or were they specific to,
Yeah,
I guess?
it's a little, so most it's a little complicated. Originally, the treatment facilities were all like addiction treatment, but when you have addiction treatment, you almost always have co-occurring disorders. There's rarely a person who's struggling with an addiction that doesn't also have depression or anxiety or PTSD or
Right. Oh,
something
that
like
makes
that,
sense. Yeah.
right? So most facilities these days are what you would call like dual diagnosis, which means that they treat both because you kind of have to. There are some facilities that are non-substance use, so they're just specifically trauma or just specifically mental health for people that are not don't have a co-occurring substance use issue. So I've done all of the above, but I spent most of my time in a dual diagnosis facility.
Okay. Cool.
Mhm.
That's
So,
cool.
yeah, how did you make that switch? How are you? I mean, I'm sure that's really intensive and very difficult to like deal with that day in and day out. I mean, yes, for the person who's struggling with that, but eventually their goal is to like graduate from the program. But you're not graduating.
Mhm.
You're dealing with every kind of case coming at you. So I'm sure that's very taxing. Was that like a big motivator to step beyond that, or what was your motivation to kind of change your
Yeah,
trajectory?
I think, when I was starting out, like I wanted to try out everything and just see what really spoke to me because you really don't know. I mean, they even ask you in school, like, what's your theoretical orientation and who do you want to work with? And you're just kind of like, I think this, but until you do it, you don't really know.
Yeah.
So I wanted to try everything and see what I would like. And, there are bits and pieces here or there. Working in treatment is taxing and
Yeah.
tiring. I think it's really great if you do it part-time or as a contractor, but when you're there
So you kind of can
full-time,
step away.
yeah,
Yeah.
full-time is tough. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. Like I'm adjacent to the therapy world. That's about as enmeshed as I want to
Yeah.
be. um was that like how did you kind of leave that and decide like okay, I mean, I don't necessarily think you've gone completely like different route because right, you still see some people struggling with
hmm
addiction, but you're not a treatment facility, but you're like that's a different level, I guess, again, another level of care. So how did you kind of branch like or decide like okay, I'm done with that, now we're moving towards this?
Yes. Yeah. So for me, it was definitely a hustle. And when you're doing your hours as a therapist, you often have like 4 jobs at the same time. You're driving all over the place. I mean, it was kind of crazy for a couple years. And basically, the way I structured it is I had a 45 hour a week job at a treatment facility. But I also wanted to dip my toe into building a practice. So I was doing it on the side. So I was doing evenings and weekends. So I worked 7 days a week for a couple of years.
7? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
Sounds about right.
That's a
which
lot.
isn't
Yeah.
isn't uncommon because I mean there are some people who have like wealth or they're married or something so they can just literally start from the ground up making no money and just slowly build. But most people I know, and like I was in this boat too, I had to have an income coming in from somewhere that was reliable.
Right.
So I had to, and then um I was doing both for a while, and it was building up, and then once I got to a place where I felt like this is enough to go full independent, plus at that point I really was like exhausted, then
Yeah.
I made the switch.
Yeah. And were you seeing like mostly similar clients, or were you already starting to see kind of your now niche market of the gay men struggling with whatever they're struggling with?
That's a good question. I mean,
I guess, how did you get from like addiction, which is non-gender specific, non-community specific, that can hit and affect anyone.
mhm.
How did you get from like that to this very specific niche? Because I know when we talked a long time ago, you had already this was your already clientele. Like you were already bringing these in, and like we'll talk about.
You were involved in that
Yeah.
amazing documentary, which
Yeah.
we should talk about too.
Mhm.
Yeah, we can talk about that. But also, like, you were already doing the addiction stuff. So how did you get from
What's the
addiction?
bridge?
Yeah.
Bridge it for us.
Yeah.
Show us the.
So there's a couple things. One is within the addiction space, I worked a lot in the LGBT addiction space. So there's like an overlap there that's pretty specific.
Was that by like choice? Was that something that
Yes.
you did like kind of rotate through?
That was by
or
choice. That was by choice by certain facilities that I decided to work at.
Okay.
And then my perspective is I feel like when you start building your practice and put yourself out there, I kind of feel like your specialty chooses you in a certain sense.
Yeah,
Because
I
you
think
can
so.
Ooh, I like that.
suggest all these different things, but certain people start reaching out to you. There's certain lanes I thought about going down or maybe tried a little bit and didn't go anywhere. But I started to notice that the majority of people reaching out to me were gay men. And so that,
Are,
yeah.
are they your like kind of same age, or because I know you mentioned teens, but you don't really deal with or work with teens anymore. Like, were you seeing like this is kind of my age range? Was that kind of coming at you at that point, or?
I don't really have an age range. No, it's pretty much
Okay.
yeah, I don't have any teens right now, but it's and I don't do that super often. So it's definitely adults, I guess usually over 30, but pretty wide age range.
I feel like we hear that a lot when we're talking about a specific audience, like in marketing, even with ourselves. We stayed open. We were working with corporate women, we were working with manufacturing companies, and then the people that we got consistently were therapists, and websites, and to the point where we were like, we need to start talking to the people who are actually trying to find us. Like
Yeah.
they need us, like
Mhm.
the other people can go anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that.
Okay, so when you went into private practice, what did that look like? Who were you mostly seeing at that point when you
Um,
started?
when I started,
Did you already have a niche? Were you like the same, not same client, but like your niche was, again, like you said, coming to you or
yeah,
deciding for
I feel like when I started, I was a little more varied, a little more scattered. I feel like the more of a niche or specialty took time for that magnet to kind of sharpen. So I felt like
Mhm.
in the beginning it wasn't as uh, weren't like anything super specific. Um, but yeah. I mean that's kind of how it just sort of you let it evolve organically in a certain sense.
What is the market, not the market, what is the competition like, I guess? Because I know we had talked at one point about it being fierce.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I just, because, you know, I don't know what it's like in West Hollywood, but what's it like to be a gay therapist in West Hollywood
The
with the
Wild West.
competition? Yeah.
It's interesting because it's definitely a saturated city. LA is really big on wellness. Anything wellness related in LA is very popular. So there's a lot
Right.
of services that offer it, including therapists. But really anything wellness related, you're going to see tons of it here. I've just noticed in particular. So I think it's interesting because there's a lot of therapists, there's a lot of providers, but there's also a lot of people who want it. So there's a lot going on for sure. As
Yeah.
opposed to, I guess, if you're in a smaller place, there may only be a couple people, but maybe less people are interested in doing it altogether. So,
As somebody who built their practice, are you seeing them struggle with things that you've already kind of like have overcome? Like, are you seeing any kind of patterns?
other therapists,
Mm-hmm. Building their practice or business or clientele?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we, when we get together and I talk to my other friends who are therapists too, we definitely compare notes about what are you doing, what am I doing. It's usually pretty similar. It's pretty much the
Yeah.
same stuff. I never really hear anything where it's completely out of the box, to be honest. Um, so yeah, but we definitely talk about like, what are you involved in? What are you interested in? Are you doing this training? Are you doing that training? That sort of thing.
Is the networking up there for therapists, like, is that like a good thing, like thriving, or is it like, I know like where we are, it's kind of a new concept that like therapists need to get out and get to know other professionals in their area. Like if you're not in a group practice, you may not, you kind of cultivate it over time, but if you're like a younger new therapist, like, networking is key, but you want to be able to network with professionals to ask your questions. Like, what is the networking like up there, or is there networking?
Oh yeah, there's a ton. There's a ton of it. There are a lot of different organizations, there's events, there's definitely a lot you can get involved in, and I think it does make a huge difference.
Yeah,
Just
I do.
yeah, getting involved, meeting people, absolutely. And I think that speaks to some people more than others. Like I really like it, so I don't feel like it's a huge chore to go to different things because I genuinely enjoy it. I know some people it feels like they really have to push themselves, but I think it's important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's definitely like, I think it's helpful to kind of, like, I don't know if you guys go and vent to each other, but it would
We
definitely be
do.
helpful to,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you need to get some of that off your chest. Otherwise, I'm sure your spouse or whatever is just like, okay, go talk to somebody else.
So that's the patterns with building the practice and networks. What's the patterns with your clientele? What are the relationship struggles? What's do you see the most? Give us the gossip.
Yeah.
In terms of relationships specifically.
Ethically. Yeah. Or like
What are
your,
you seeing in your practice the most?
yeah.
Is there any specific thing that stands out? Maybe it's relationship counseling, maybe it's trauma-based therapy, maybe it's what keeps coming up,
Within your
Hmm.
niche. Yeah.
Hmm.
especially this generation specific.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I would say, well, one thing, so I do a lot of trauma work. One thing in particular that comes up a lot in my population with gay men is sexual trauma. That's unfortunately very common. Sexual trauma that occurred when they were children or as an adult. Actually, usually it's when they were a child, and it's something that's still affecting them. Is is
Yeah.
is super common and something that a lot of my work does revolve around. Not with everybody, but it does come up.
That's heavy though.
It
That's a
is, yeah.
lot.
Hmm.
And that's awful. I mean, you're kind of making it sound like that's a high percentage of people. Um, in, but is it specifically just in the gay men community, or is it across the LGBTQ?
Um, I guess I would put it this way. I think it's more, and I don't have a statistic to back this up, but I think it's more common with gay men than straight men that they had this experience when they were younger, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awful. So you're seeing that, and then do those? I'm assuming those like childhood traumas or adulthood traumas are kind of bleeding out into
Professional lives.
professional relationships, like, all
Hmm.
aspects kind of similar, like it would to me. Like if that had happened to me, I can't imagine how it would affect that in my professional, personal, everything life. um so is that like, is that kind of, you start with this is the trauma and then you kind of branch into the other aspects, or are they just coming to you and like leaving with the trauma and calling it a day?
So yeah, you definitely want to think about how did this experience impact this person in particular, because it will vary dramatically. I mean, we all know that that happen to us when we're children affect us so much more than things that happen to us as adults. Like I barely remember what happened last week, but so many things from my upbringing are, seared in my memory and inform who I am, So,
Right.
teasing that apart and understanding that is a huge part of it. And it's a process too. And because it's intense, you really have to kind of go slow and take it your time. And I think some people think too when they go to trauma therapy that every week you're just going to be attacking it. And it's not like that. You
Beating it.
really have to like take your foot off the gas and then kind of because otherwise it will feel like flooding and just too much. So it takes time, but it works.
Yeah. So aside from the trauma, you mentioned that you were seeing more relationship and stuff like that.
Hmm.
What does that look like? Like what are their struggles? Like what are they struggling with? I'm sure it's very similar to like heterosexual couples and, whatever couples. So I'm just curious like what their relationship issues. I mean, you don't have to like share exact experiences or anything, but like what are you seeing in relationship aspects of your practice?
Yeah, so I think, the desire to connect and to bond is universal. And it's also very complicated. I mean, like every popular song ever written is about love or love lost and how to make this work. And it's like the biggest human confusion. So I think that's universal for sure.
Humans are so complex
Right. Um,
with all of our mental health
exactly,
issues.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
We're just on a thread.
Yeah, we're all walking a very tight rope, but
Nobody is doing well.
Right.
no. Anyway.
Yeah, but I think for gay men in particular, the complication is that growing up, we were either told that we couldn't have these type of relationships, or if we did, it had to be secretive, or
Mhm.
if we did, it just may not be as valid. Like you can be together, but you're not married, or you can't have
Yeah.
kids. So there were a lot of conditions placed off of it, and those really do impact how you approach it. I think some people, and then that changed. Then now it's different. So I think a lot of people, that's quite confusing to be told something for so long, and now it's, oh, never mind, go have a normal relationship, and you feel like, well, I spent
Yeah.
all these years being told I couldn't have this.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like you're not. It's not easy because you can't accidentally have a family, but like that whole it's still there's still struggles with that. Like you have to figure out like the best route you're going to take, like all of those kind of things. Are you seeing mostly like relationships between people that either are married or want to get married, or are you seeing people who are struggling with like finding friends? Like, what kind of level of relationships are you focusing on more, you think? Or seeing more, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's pretty even split between people who are in relationships that either aren't going well, or they're hitting some sort of rough patch, or they're not sure what to do, or they're re-examining it for whatever reason, um, or people who want a relationship and have just been unsuccessful in finding one or sustaining one.
Are you ever seeing people that are coming to you and like they're already in a relationship and it's going well, but like one person maybe does want to start a family and look at those options and the other person isn't, like because they're worried about all the stigmas that are going to be thrown at them or
Or the open marriages too.
I wasn't even going that route. We can go that route.
I think
That's what I was to my friend, her and her wife are exploring open marriage, and she said it's like very common.
Yeah.
They're in, well, I won't say what state they're in, but they said like it's what their whole group does.
Yes. Yeah, I think that is a really common thing that comes up because non-traditional relationships, open relationships, things like that are really common in the LGBT community. So that's definitely something that couples navigate. Either that one person wants to do it and the other person does not, or that a lot of times they both do. They're just trying to figure out how to operate within that new terrain because it is complicated. So that's a really common thing that you see. Yeah.
What,
I'm sure there's a lot of breaking barriers, constructs, things.
why is that such a common thing? See, I'm learning. I don't.
Yeah. Well, I think, just generally speaking, human beings are sexual, and we've been told that we have to confine our sexuality in a very specific way, that you get married and you only explore sexuality with that person forever. And for a lot of people, that's, you're allowed to explore before then, and then it stops, and then you're with that person.
Right.
And for a lot of people, that's great. That works for them. They're super happy with that. But a lot of people, still want to explore things sexual, in general, after that. I mean, people have been having affairs forever. I mean, so this is normal human behavior. It's been going on. So I think one thing,
It's just kind of like you're more like roping in your instead
No,
of
the
having
conversation is doing it in a way that's trustworthy.
yes,
If you have a long-term
yes,
partner, there's trust, there's communications, and there's like respect. So as long as you
hmm
set the communication barriers with your partner or wife or spouse or husband, um, that what you do sexually could actually benefit your relationship versus holding back
hmm
and being repressed, resentful. Like, I mean, the conversation's huge.
you're completely right. And I think one of the benefits of being in the queer community is that we do get to make our own rules. We don't have to, we're not stuck in certain lanes, which I think is really fantastic. And I agree. I think that having a conscious conversation with your partner about sexual things you want to do, it builds trust, even if for sure it's going to trigger some sort of uncertainty or anxiety or insecurity. Those things are going to come up for definitely, but you know, traditionally, if a man wanted to explore sex outside of his marriage, he has an affair with his secretary or something and doesn't
yeah,
tell
like
his
a
wife about
secretive.
it. Right, right. And then it becomes this betrayal and then maybe he even gets confused and thinks that she's the better woman for me and then he leaves her, and it goes off the rails.
Yeah. Yeah, see, that's where like my brain went, like the like insecurity, the jealousy, the like, that kind of route. So I mean, I've never had that conversation because
When I have a close relative too who she's married, she's happy, but she's also finding that she's attracted to women, like
Mhm.
stuff that when she with her religious upbringing, she didn't really get to explore. So while she's happy and she loves her relationship, she feels like a part of her is missing, and that conversation kind of fits that too.
Yes, that's a great point. Sometimes even if you have a great sex life with your significant other, there may be some specific thing that you're into that they're not, and then you may start to feel deprived, you know? And it's not about the other
Yeah.
person not being good enough or lacking anything. It's just that you're into this food and I'm into that food, and that can be okay.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I honestly like you guys just like opened a whole like
I know. I love
thing
this
for me that I was
conversation.
just like, wait, what?
Okay. Okay. So let's wrap this up. What's on the horizon for you? I
Mm,
know, but tell
We
us.
know,
yes.
but you
Yeah.
No, but no, you're the entrepreneur. Like you have built your practice. You have come a long way. You don't seem like you're stopping
Mm-mm.
yet. What's on the horizon?
Yeah, so I definitely, I love what I'm doing now, and I want to keep growing that and gaining skills and doing better work, in the train that I'm in now. I've also gotten really involved in the ketamine medicine space this past year.
Yes.
Not honestly, kind of by accident, just sort of stumbled upon me, but I've
How do you stumble upon
oh,
ketamine?
Tell
so
us what it is
oh
first.
Oh
yes,
yeah,
oh yeah,
we can.
yeah, yeah. Ketamine is a medicine that's been used as an anesthetic, like for surgeries, for decades. It's been around a very, very, very long time.
Like a full anesthetic
Yes,
or like kind of
yeah,
that dream
for surgery,
state?
yeah, for surgery. That's been what it's been used for.
Oh, knocked out.
Yeah,
Yeah, like fully
fully
knocked
knocked
out. Yeah.
out. Yep. And the reason it's been used is because it's very safe. Some anesthetics, when they knock you out, they depress your nervous system a lot, which is dangerous because then you could die. But ketamine only depresses it a little bit. Like it's a subtle one. That's why opiates are so deadly because they depress your nervous system really strongly. So if that goes too far, you stop breathing, basically. But anyway, with an anesthetic, you want one that doesn't do that much, and ketamine is like that, so it's been used safely.
Hopefully.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But what we've seen with ketamine, so in the field, there's sort of two things. The way this can go is that either we discover something new, and it's brand new, or we're discovering a new purpose for something we already had, and that's what we're seeing with ketamine. And what we're seeing with ketamine is that it has this incredible antidepressant effect that we have not been able to generate from really anything else. And it's in something that we've already had in our hands for quite a long time. We just didn't know it. Yeah.
But it's not something that comes like an SSRI medication. Like it's not it's not a pill form that you
It's like
can
an
dose.
IV, right?
Yeah, it's like something that has to be administered in a doctor's office with a doctor or medical
So
professional.
there are different, this is where it gets a little complicated. There are different routes of administration. So yeah, it's not like a Prozac where it's just a pill, you get it from the pharmacy, you take it every day, that's the end of the story. The benefit about ketamine is that you don't have to take it every day. You usually go for a series of about 6 infusions, and then maybe you do maintenance from there, like, I don't know, once a month, once a quarter, or something like that. But so it's not like a daily medicine that you have to consume. But there's different routes of administration. The one that the research is based off of the most, and that's the strongest and the most well known, is an IV, which you do in a doctor's office. Correct.
Right. So
I'm a big fan of drama. Has it been suppressed by big drug companies? Is that why we're just hearing about it? Or has it really not been known? I feel like, was there not talk in the 90s, 80s about it?
Yes. So there's so ketamine is interesting too because it has this antidepressant effect. It has this anesthesia effect, but it also does have a psychedelic component too. When you take it, you go into this psychedelic dream world. All of the psychedelic medicines in America have been uh, pushed to the side, I guess I would say. That we've seen that there's a really interesting documentary on Netflix about this called How to Change Your Mind, I think it's what it's called. It's really good. But it basically goes into, we discovered decades ago that these medicines, like ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin, a bunch of them, had these medicinal effects. However, they also were seeing that they could be abused and that they could trigger psychosis and stuff like that. And this was at a different time in our country. And so the rhetoric was, get these away from us. These are a huge threat to society. Throw them away, including the benefits. Now we've seen, so there's been like a retrieval, I guess I would say. Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's been I think a fight for a long time to get these like out of jail, like to say like, no, these actually can be really useful. And anyway, and ketamine falls into that bucket.
Yeah.
So is it a mind reset? Like, does it?
What does it? What does it do?
Are you just taking a break from your depression? Are you discovering new lines of thought?
Yeah.
Where does it go?
So this is going to be one of those maybe more frustrating answers, but with a lot of medicines that work.
You say it's case by case. I'm done.
Okay. Well, I guess what I would put it this way is that we can see when you give someone ketamine, you can see the like certain effects it's having in their brain, but the effect can be different from person to person. And we also don't know exactly how that's going to, like, for example, like an SSRI like Prozac targets serotonin. It's pretty specific. But you give that drug to 10 people, they're going to have different reactions, even though it's going to.
Well, and like weight gain is one of the biggest.
Right. It's going to, so even if we know where a drug is going, it doesn't necessarily mean we know what it's going to do specifically to you. But what we do know just by large data is that it has this huge antidepressant effect in general. So there's a good chance that it's going to have it on you.
Okay, so we're going to get to the important part about your ketamine journey here, but I want to step back for just a minute and talk about like ketamine. When you administer it, what happens? Like, do you just like sit there and you're kind of knocked out and then you leave and you're done? Or like what does that look like start to finish?
Yes.
In a normal ketamine clinic
Let's
situation. Yeah, like an IV. Well, I think that it is an IV, only IV situation.
So in a clinic, you can do the IV, which is the most common. You can also do a shot in your arm, which is less common, but you can also do there as well too.
It seems like it would be a lot less medicine.
The problem with the shot is actually you get all of the medicine at once. So you get like a peak experience, then it kind of goes down. The thing what's great about the IV is that it's consistent and you can turn it up or turn it down as you're going. Because it's
like an epidural.
Right, yeah, because it's like flowing in. So it's not just like so anyway, it's much more common. But so doing the ketamine medicine, it is intense. The way it works is you have like an eye mask, they put this meditation music on, you lay back in a chair, you have blankets. So they create a vibe for you, and then they start the IV. But what happens is initially you start to feel a sense of calmness and your body starts to get kind of numb. and then you do start to go into this dream world where that it is pretty psychedelic. It's like a dream within a dream within a dream, and
But like inside the mind of like Alice in Wonderland.
kind of,
That
yeah. But it's
situation?
specific to you. You'll be thinking about your life, and it can be quite intense. Yeah.
Can it be like, see, I'm picturing this and it's giving me like anxiety. Like, would I jump into this and just start reliving all of these like traumatic moments where you're kind of trapped in it because you're medically trapped in it?
So this is
Or,
yeah, this is why so most of these clinics just give you the ketamine. But we are seeing now, and this is part of the project I want to do, is that it is so imperative that you work with a therapist while you're doing this experience because you need someone to thoroughly prepare you for what you're going into. A lot of these clinics,
Mhm.
you just go and they're like, oh, here's your IV, and then
yeah, do they like leave you in this room by yourself? Like, that
yeah,
seems
You
so
are
some of them do.
terrifying.
Some of them do. Yeah, the
Yeah.
good ones, they're checking on you and they're seeing how you're doing. So there's definitely good places and bad, like with any business, but
So you're kind of still lucid.
I would describe it as you will go in and out of awareness that you're doing this. Like you'll have moments where you're like,
Okay.
oh yeah, yeah, I'm here, I'm on ketamine, and then moments where you're just lost, sort of
Okay.
a thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes. But to your point,
So your plan.
yes, but to your point though, when you're going through the psychedelic, like with any psychedelic, you do mushrooms, you do NDA, ayahuasca, anything, the content that comes up can be positive or negative. It's not just, oh, I take this and I go on a joyride. It can be intense. And so that's why you want to have a therapist who can help you unpack and process it, even though if the material that comes up is intense and scary, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It may actually be really useful stuff, but if you're dealing with it alone, it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah. So
Makes
your
sense.
new venture that you're thinking about, like, what is that going to look like? Are you have somebody who will help you administer it, but then are you sitting with them while they're kind of going through that, or are you again leaving them and then you're checking in with them, but on like a more mental health specific level versus like a hey, how are you doing?
Right, right. Yeah, so what I want to do is create a clinic that doesn't, yeah, it combines the medicine and the therapy just to make it simple. And I really want to customize it from person to person because some people
Mhm.
may want a therapist there with them in the moment during the IV, which you can do. Someone may want someone after, someone may want someone before. Like and you can play around with it too because you usually do 6 infusions, so you can test one out and say, next time I want to do this. So I think having a customized experience is so important to this. And typically that's not the case. It's just buy your
Yeah.
infusion pack and call it a day.
And then you can just leave. Like, are you not just like drugged?
Yeah, so when you
Like,
come out of it, you are definitely like drugged and kind of disoriented, and you slowly gain everything back over a couple hours. But you have to have a ride home, so there's a little bit of a process coming out of it.
Like anesthesia
yeah,
and
I
like
mean,
the
it
gas
sounds like
and
if you
like
were to get
regular
like,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
were to
yeah,
go get
exactly.
your yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
Pilot earrings.
All right, so there's one specific celebrity in the news that died of a ketamine. What happened? Do we think,
Yeah.
or do we
Oh,
know? We
we
don't
no,
like.
we know for sure. So this is, one of
We're
the,
talking Matthew.
yeah. So
Mhm.
one of the fears with ketamine is that people are going to abuse it. And this is the thing about it is that people can abuse anything. People can abuse literally anything.
They make things out of their kitchen
Right.
products.
Exactly. So with the opioid crisis, we were giving people pill bottles to take home so they could self-administer. And that substance in particular was insanely addictive, and anyone taking it would go through withdrawal. Literally anyone. So it was,
Heroin addiction, later bath
yeah,
salts. Like it was
it
a
was a
whole.
disaster. Yeah. So ketamine doesn't have that addictive quality to it at all physically. However, people who do like abusing substances may enjoy the high of it, and people have taken ketamine as a party drug for a while. That's been pretty common. They take it in a very small dose because they don't want to be passed out. They want to have like a little sense of calm. So that is one of the concerns is, are we going to push people or encourage that sort of a thing? And what I would say is this is that first of all, with the ketamine work, you're not handing it to people. They're doing it in your office. They're not self-administering. They don't get a to-go bag. So it's completely controlled.
Empty bag to go.
Your ketamine,
Yeah,
please.
no. They do have these online companies that I disagree with that mail you ketamine lozenges. That's a whole other story.
That was what I was gonna ask. Like, how are they party drugging themselves? Like, I'm sure they aren't. Maybe you know what? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean those places they have a protocol, and again, they don't give you like 200. They give you a certain amount, and it's kind of stops there. So, you know, but and yeah, that stuff I'm not gonna go too far in that, but
Yeah.
but anyway, so I think that someone like Matthew Perry, though, is the concern, which is if you have someone who has a history of addiction, that they could go do this treatment, get triggered, and then go want to do it on their own. That would be my concern. Like if the random person came and did ketamine, I'm not concerned that they're going to go, oh, I love how this feels. Let me go buy some from a drug dealer. That's not, I don't have any concern that would happen. But someone who has a very strong addiction history, I would have that concern. And he is someone who fell into that category.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he was very open about falling into that category.
Very open. And by the way, there are people who are in recovery and do ketamine treatments, but you have to be really, and this is why you want to work with an addiction therapist, you want to make sure that their sobriety is solid, like so solid. I would even want to talk to their sponsor. If I would want to know how serious is this person, how firmly planted are they in their recovery? Because if they're shaky at all, I would get nervous. But from what I understand with him in particular, he went to a clinic for the treatments and he kept asking for more and higher doses and they turned him away. So they did the right thing, as far as I understand. He wasn't given it, and then he's rich, so he bought it from shady people and drug dealers on the street or whatnot. But that wasn't like, he wasn't doing the protocol and then he just died. That's not what happened. He went and did his own very risky thing, unfortunately.
Well, and I think it's really important that, like, that's why I'm glad we're talking about it in this positive aspect, because like it needs to be focused. The focus is so shifted right now, and it needs to shift back to like the positives of it and not the like exception. Sorry, I was trying to think of the word. Because again, like you said, like he had a very long addiction history. So it's different. Like his experience with a drug is going to be so different than somebody who maybe has never had any kind of addiction history and is just dealing with the depression aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly with any medical service, if you just do it on your own at home, I mean, that's a risk. I mean, you're taking on a huge risk if you're just going to find the medicine yourself. I mean, you mentioned an epidural. It's like, imagine you got that and you just did it yourself at home. I mean, that could go bad.
No, I could be paralyzed. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Now, does the ketamine clinic have to be a separate entity than your private practice?
Yes.
Or are you just establishing it as one? Or you're following guidelines?
Yes.
Yeah,
ketamine clinics have to be medical corporations in California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so like here, we know of one that is available. I'm sure. What does LA look like?
Good feedback too.
It has had good feedback, but
yeah,
it doesn't look like the place I would want to go.
Yeah.
It doesn't look bad. It's just like, to me, it looks like two dudes running it who are just like, doing what you said. Like,
she had a great experience.
Come in, you sit in your room, they occasionally have somebody check on you. Like that's what I got off of it. I had researched them after you and I had kind of talked about your business plan. And so I was like already kind of like, that makes more sense to do your business model than just like, like an outpatient surgery center.
Oh, I would definitely pay you for your model versus just showing up.
But what does that look like in LA? Like, are there a lot of these? Is this kind of like been around for a while, but in the check-in, check-out aspect, or what is that?
Yeah, so there's definitely a handful of clinics here for sure, and technically any doctor can perform them, but there's like specialty clinics people go to. I would say that it's relatively new. I mean, some of these clinics may say we've been doing it for a while, but really I would say 2019, 2020 is when it's really took off.
Oh, really new? Okay.
Yeah, pretty recent.
Is everything out of network?
Yes.
Or can you get these in network?
It is expensive. Yeah. Yep. It is definitely it's an expensive thing to do.
Okay. What are the ballpark price ranges for what you're area is seeing?
Um,
For like what they don't recommend doing it treatment by treatment, right? It's kind of like a minimum of like this many to this many.
yeah, so
Or
the standard research is based off of this protocol of doing 6 infusions, which even that is kind of a guess. Some people need more, some people need less, but um, usually the way it works is you can pay as you go, just try one, see how you like it. Or if you buy the whole pack of 6, you usually get like a little discount or something like that.
right, that makes
But
sense.
each infusion, you're looking at 600, 700, 750, 800. I mean, it could be, yeah.
And that doesn't include any kind of like mental health
No,
therapy. That's just
that's just the
the
medicine.
medication
Yeah.
administration. Okay.
But I will say though, I mean, it's a cost for sure, but the cost of overhead to administer an infusion is also pretty high because you have to have at least a certain level of nurse there. You have to have all the equipment. You have to monitor them, give them medication. So it's not the same as a pharmacy that compounds a pill.
Right. It's yeah. The cost is necessary for what has to happen. That kind of thing. Yeah. All right. Well, that was a lot. I'm really excited about our conversation today. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And we will link your website and social media in the show notes.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to go to West Hollywood and check out Michael's stuff, or even...
We didn't have time to talk about the documentary or some of the other stuff, so be sure to check out his website, his blog articles, and his other specialties. It's all on his website.
Can you do like a quick little spiel about your documentary so they know what to expect?
Yes, so I'm in a documentary about gay men and sexual trauma. It tells the vignettes of 3 guys in particular, and it's really well done, high production value, that sort of a thing. It's not, we don't have a release date yet, so it's still TBD, so I will post that when it's ready.
Okay, cool. Yeah. All right, well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Follow Michael on Instagram for more.
Bye.
Yeah, Michael.